Very good. All right, very good. Welcome everybody. This is Monica, Empower Your Health, Empower Your Life TV. And for those of you who are listening live on YouTube, or those of you who are listening to the recording, thank you so much for being here. And I understand that there's so much competing for your time and attention these days. But I know that our guest today is going to provide you with incredible value and amazing inspiration and action steps. So thank you so much for being here. And I promise, that we'll deliver something that hopefully will be very beneficial to you. So Empower TV is dedicated to bringing you outstanding leaders, thinkers, pioneers, and change makers in the area of individual and community health. And the single goal is to bring you inspiration to take action and empower yourself. So like I said, we have a very special guest today, and I'm truly honored to welcome him today. So let's welcome Adam Apollo. And Adam has offered insights on global transitions, physics, technology, human spirituality, and the future as a next generation leadership ambassador at the White House, in multiple NEXUS and other summits at the United Nations, and at conferences and festivals around the world. He's a co-founder of the UNIFY movement and two educational and technology-based companies, Granted and Superluminal Systems. He is an active faculty member, author, and the lead systems architect for several international online academies. These include Resonance Academy for Unified Physics, the Guardian Alliance Academy for Self-Mastery, and the Visionary Arts Academy. He currently has 40,000 active students of all ages from around the world across these schools. He is an author of many papers and online courses in physics, a martial artist, a massage therapist, an educator in sexuality and health, a poet as well. And Adam has also been featured around the world as a DJ and performer, and is highly active on global councils for sustainability and planetary, social, economic, and environmental restoration. Adam Apollo is dedicated to achieving a sustainable and thriving interplanetary culture. And like I said, I'm truly honored to welcome Adam. I am just really, what I want to honor about Adam is that I see him as a true leader, somebody who's bringing the depth of his wisdom and knowledge, his scientific background, but also his deep connection with spiritual practices and spiritual mastery. And to me, this is, the way that I see our leaders need to be. And I also feel there is a huge need in our collective to create this new form of leadership. And I feel like Adam is the role model for this. So like I said, I was truly honored he considered joining us on this channel. Welcome. Such a pleasure to see you here. And yes, so how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Monica. I'm doing great. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. And look forward to sharing some insights with your audience. It's a powerful and transformational time that we're in right now. So it's a good time for us to be sharing and dropping in together.
Yes, I feel so too. And this is why I wanted to invite you to share with us, what is on your mind currently? What do you feel like would be an important message to share with our communities here?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could get into that are, I think, important concepts for us to hold right now. I mean, there's a whole library of practices people really should be diving into in these times. But if I were to take all of it and break it down to the most deep and fundamental component, it would be about returning home to the moment. And what that means is recognizing that our minds are constantly receiving and transmitting information. We're constantly being deluged with new ideas, with, news and theories about what's happening, conspiracies, and some things may be true and some things may not be true. And the more we get caught up in our mind and the constant questioning, is this or that, and this or that, and this or that, the more we can feel a little bit like we're riding a spiraling vortex current, and it makes us dizzy. It makes us feel a little bit lost. And in that vortex, we might also have a challenge in sensing what it is we should be doing, what it is that we should be dedicating our time and our lives to. And so the mind can really leave us in a place where we're a bit swirled, you know, but the beauty is that our being is not just mental. And underlying our astral mental structure, which is being heavily bombarded at this time, we have our etheric body, which is vibrating and flowing with our emotions. And those emotions, as our mind gets caught in certain patterns, can also get swirled up. And we find shadows, we find pain, we find doubt, we find hurt, we find grief that we haven't looked at because now it's all getting stirred, right? And underneath that emotional field, we have our bodies and our physical nature. And our physical body is always seeking nourishment and grounding and presence and care to be exercised, to allow it to be strong, to be expressed, you know, to go out and do things in the world. And again, when our mind is swirled and our emotions are swirling, sometimes it can feel difficult to connect to our bodies. And so there's a cascading effect that occurs when our mind runs rampant and we don't grab the reins and we don't say, whoa, hold on a second. And the returning home to the center, to the moment, to the present is really about just stopping everything. And it's about getting to that place within yourself where you're just observing for a moment. You're just witnessing, okay, yeah, I was, you know, I stayed up too late, or I slept too late, or I spent too much time doing this, or I spent too much time doing that, or I didn't get enough work done today, or I worked too hard today. All of these different interplays in the mind is just saying, whoa, hold on. Maybe some of that is true. Maybe some of that is not true. But where am I at right now? What is it that I feel? And where's my being at right now? Can I accept where I am right now? Can I drop into what I feel and what's in my body and where my being is in this moment? Not the thoughts about what's going to happen next, not the thoughts about the next project you got to get done or how much production you're doing or whatever, but just being and just stilling and just finding the center point of that swirling vortex right in the middle. And in that place is the place where we have so much freedom. Because no matter how trapped you feel, no matter how stuck you feel, no matter how lost you feel or confused you feel, when you come home to that place in the middle of, as good friend Master Bluestone liked to say, in the middle of the sphere of the rolling mirror, the center of all things, from there, you can choose in the moment to do anything, be anything, feel anything you want. And for some people, accessing that 0 point can be hard. It can be difficult to do just in like sitting down and being quiet, for example, because there might be kids running around, you know, there might be horns outside, there might be things happening. And so for some people, the right route to finding that stillness is actually through movement. And for me, that's the case. So I find that when I get in my body and I stand in a certain way and I breathe my breath through my body, And I feel all the cells in my body, and I feel the current of my breath and of my blood and of the charge in my body. I began getting in touch with all the layers of resonance, all the layers of emotion, but not in a way that I'm suddenly swept into one or another, but in a way that is allowing me to just notice where and how the currents of feeling are moving, where and how I'm happy with myself and my life, where and how I might be upset with myself or with others in my life, where and how my mind might have been leaving me stretched out in all of these different directions. And as I breathe and as I move, and for me, Tai Chi and sword work are really critical, martial arts is really critical to this. I find that place where I am at the center of my universe and I am powerful and I can choose whatever I want. And I can decide. I can literally cut away those thoughts and those ideas and those things that are no longer serving me. And I can select those things that do serve me and that are in alignment with where I'm at right now. And forge my path forward in this moment, from this stillness, from this place where I'm at peace, where I'm in home, where I'm in my center.
That's beautiful. Coming home
Mm-hmm.
and really finding the center, and then from there we're powerful. And you know what I'm thinking? It's an incredibly empowering place to be for every human being. At the same time, you know, a lot of us may be asking like, wow, but it takes so much work to arrive at that place where I can center. So, I mean, can you tell us more about your background and how your journey of actually being able to have such clear vision um, and this ability to actually come home?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I will say, just to those that say, wow, yeah, it just takes so much effort to stop everything. Actually, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's actually the act of stopping the effort, because when we are using effort, we are forging a direction, and directions are good. It's good to go in directions. Directions move things. They change things in our lives. The goal is not just to be a monk sitting on a mountaintop and watching the whole universe pass by, right? Because we're in a time where we need change, we need action, we need creation. But if we're trying to, take action from a place where we're caught up in a variety of directions and we're constantly spread out very far, it's kind of like trying to pick up a 50-pound weight, with your arms stretched out over here,
Right.
and you're trying to lift it. And you're like, oh God, I can't, it's really hard, but if you bring it in here, you lift it, right? So just important to say that. And for me, growing up as a kid, I was all over the place, and I had a huge interest in a whole lot of different areas of life and information. I used to ride my BMX bike around Red River, New Mexico, and I was a skier, and I did really well in school, although I was always frustrated by the limitations in school and by the things I felt were not totally accurate in what I was being taught and learned. I fortunately was lucky enough to grow up in my early years in a little town called Red River, New Mexico, where there was only 30 kids in my school from kindergarten through 5th grade. Literally, we'd have 2 grades per classroom. So one teacher would teach multiple grades in the same room. And, so there's like 10 kids in the classroom, 5 kids in your grade. And so fortunately, during those years, I was able to progress really quickly because my teacher saw that I was not satisfied with what I was being given. And so I was able to just go. So by the time I was in 5th grade, I had already was at like an 8th grade reading level, and I was doing more advanced mathematics and just playing with things that at a more advanced level than most kids. And around that time, my life went through a major transformation and shift. My mom took me to India for the first time, and I went to this center where this man who people know as Meher Baba, his name was Merwan Shariar Irani, but where he had done a lot of these powerful miracles, and there's a pilgrimage center there. It turned out that my grandparents and their friends had all encountered this man at some point. And the experiences that they had had were just far beyond my understanding at that time. But the stories that I heard and the things that I witnessed and the sort of, powerful emotional devotion and experience of these people was that, they literally experienced the infinite or the eternal, looking them in the eyes, and suddenly realized themselves as these infinite beings. Now for, a 10-year-old kid, that it doesn't mean anything. Like, I'm like, what, like, what are you talking about? Like, I remember I was like hanging out with this other little kid and playing with like magnifying glasses, and I was like burning leaves and like, burned an ant or two. It was like, I was not in the mode to understand that, but I witnessed things that were very powerful and that I just couldn't understand. Spontaneous singing and just like these moments that were really powerful. And on my way back from India, traveling 36 hours by plane and train and etc., I finally made it my way back to where my dad was living. My parents divorced when I was very little. And I arrived into the airport at St. Louis, Missouri, get off the plane, and I'd hardly slept the entire trip. The stewardess like had to shake me awake on the last flight, and I kind of get off in a dream world. And I find my dad, and he looks at me with these bloodshot eyes, and he said, your stepmother just died in a car accident last night, and along with your stepbrother's fiance, and your stepbrother is in the hospital with critical injuries. Do you want to go home, or do you want to drive 2 hours and go see your brother? And so that was the beginning for me of kind of crossing into this strange dream world where it was like I couldn't sleep much. My dad's life was like wrecked. My stepbrother had been driving the car. He had just gotten back from Italy with his fiance, who he had just talked to her whole family about marrying her, and like she's got this Italian family, and he killed his fiance and his mom by falling asleep at the wheel and driving across the median, and hit another car head on and killed that entire family. And for, a 10-year-old kid, processing that is just unfathomably difficult. Like, I couldn't really, it was more like I was in this strange lost space, caught between a lot of forces and emotions. And my stepbrothers were, had kind of gone crazy. And, I was trying to take care of my dad, but I couldn't really do it. I was staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I was waking up at 6 in the morning and going to school, and didn't care to make friends. And so a huge reset button was hit in my life. And it started a cascade of more reset buttons where I like drive across the country with my dad as he takes me to my mom's because he's going to go to Hawaii and visit his friend. Our car gets robbed on the way, and the only thing stolen from the car was my bag and all of my stuff. So I lose all of my stuff, all of my concept of what my life should be like. Mm-hmm. And that year I got real quiet. I started really wondering what it's all about. What is God? What is life? What is reality? What are these things that we're encountering? And it took me quite a few years to sort of move through this journey of questioning and getting more and more kind of upset with and dissatisfied with the answers that I was being given, and finding more and more holes in the story that I was being told about reality and the story that I'm being told in school, until finally around the time that I was 15, I had an older friend. His name is Chris Oriana, dear brother of mine. And he and I were sort of philosophizing. We used to play hacky sack together and hang out at cafes and drink coffee. And we were philosophizing together and came to these very specific questions. Like, how is it possible that someone could be looking at you from across the room and you could feel it? Like, there's got to be a physics to that. You can't just have this completely unexplained phenomena in science that nobody has an answer for, you know. It's just not there. And how is it that you think of someone and they call you on the phone? And in those days, it was landlines. I mean, now that happens all the time. People are very used to this experience. But then people didn't have cell phones. It was landlines. You know, this was 1996. and the question was, you know, how is that physically possible? And this led to a series of experiments. And in those experiments, what I was able to discover, and it was really through this one particular exercise that I talk to people about in some of my talks and workshops, but it's putting your fingers together and you just look at the connection between them. And then you just very, very slowly start to separate your fingertips, and you just relax your arms, relax your shoulders, and you just let that space grow between them. And for the first time, I felt something. It was like tingling between my fingertips. And I noticed that I could see these little subtle smoky streams between my fingers. And I suddenly realized there was a field of force that I could actually see, that I could witness, that was connecting my fingers. And I began experimenting with this, locating an object across the room blindfolded. My bro and I started doing blindfolded martial arts to see if we could feel where the tingle was of where the other person's arm was going to go. And started playing all of these games, exploring this. And for a 15-year-old kid, it was like finding out the force is real, you know, finding out that there's some secret underlying field that nobody's talking about, that's not in science. And suddenly everything in me shifted. I stopped being so anxious. I stopped being concerned about what other people were thinking of me. I stopped worrying about whether I looked cool or not. I stopped all this external mental noise, which was just like this, like of everything all the time. I just tuned it down, and I started paying attention to myself as an energetic body, as a being that is vibrating, that has the capacity to release those vibrations and change what happens around me. And needless to say, that was the beginning of a sequence of, you know, what I could only describe as absolute miracles. Some of the most incredible things that have ever happened to me, and that I could ever even tell stories about. Just unbelievable miracles, and events, and a sequence of events that led me to definitively, beyond the shadow of a doubt, know that there is an innate intelligence to this universe. And I became massively driven to understand that. And so I spent years after that diving into physics and diving into science at a deeper level, and seeking to truly understand and explore what that intelligence is, and what we are, and how we are connected to everything.
Wow. And you know, that's a powerful story. And thank you for sharing about your background. And you know, what was coming up for me is that, you know, you discovered the force, you discovered that amazing you know, place where you can come home, but it's not just for some people, it is all of us, that we live in this universe that is so much more expansive. And I think we still are not connected to that, to actually remembering that.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
it doesn't take, like you said, it doesn't take many, many years. It can take a split second to actually reconnect
Yeah.
with that force, with that capacity that we have innate to us as every human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it did. It
Mhm.
was a split second for me. It was the
Yeah.
moment of suddenly realizing that there's something that could explain all of these phenomena that I'd
Mm-hmm.
heard about, you know,
Yeah.
from psychic abilities to, you know, the guy supposedly doing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
chi stuff and setting a newspaper on fire, and you know, like all of these different legends and martial arts. And I've been a martial artist since I was very, very little, just intuitively mostly, and of
Mm-hmm.
course took courses and classes, and mostly found that teachers did not know what they were talking about and were not very good at all.
Right.
But eventually found, you know, a master I could work with in college, who was, you know, a student of Benjamin Low, who was a student of Chen
Mm-hmm.
Menqing, and brought through, you know, the real purest form of the ancient Yang style, Yang family form of Tai Chi Chuan, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's amazing how overnight everything in your perception can shift when you suddenly get in touch with a deeper layer of what is real and what's true. And it's undeniably true when you experience it with somebody else, and you start exchanging energy and you start playing with these things. It just massively shakes the foundations of everything that you've been taught, and you wonder, why is it that nobody's ever taught me this before?
Yeah.
Why is it that this isn't part of our school system? And these questions, you know, lead to some very interesting
Mm-hmm.
answers if you dig deep enough. um, but you know, in martial arts and in Tai Chi, they call it seeing the flag. So there's the times of practice, there's the desire and the expression of the self to find the self. And so, you know, you could say that those years that I spent after that very traumatic experience were really like years of kind of practicing and hardening and getting deeper into, like, how do I ask the right questions, like, and what are the right questions.
Yes.
And then once I found the right questions and I found a way to test those questions, suddenly the truth revealed itself. And when I felt energy and experienced the fluctuations of the quantum vacuum responding to my conscious intent, I saw the flag. I realized that this is something real and very powerful. And then, of course, you know, realized that I wasn't alone, and discovered that people have called it prana and chi and ki and vital force and an odic force, and, you know, a variety of different names across many, many different traditions, across all kinds of, you know, cultures and history. And then, of course, realized that in science, initially in philosophy, which was the root of physics as we know it, it was called the ether in Greco-Roman background, and the ether is this fifth force, this sort of underlying field which gives rise to the different elemental forces. And now most people, you know, these days they just think of like, oh yeah, the four elements, like that's what like Wiccans talk about, or what's, you know, Native American people, like that's from like ancient days. But what they don't realize is that all of our sciences of the physical world are based on the four elements.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got basically thermodynamics, which is fire, aerodynamics, which is air, you know, geodynamics, or geology, which is the study of earth, and hydrodynamics, which is
Mm-hmm.
the study of water. You know,
Wow.
and then that's basically the encompassing of most of the major fields of the study of the processes that matter, you know, moves through in nature. So we haven't lost them at all. We're just calling them
Right.
different things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we haven't lost anything, but why do we feel so disconnected? I mean, not we, but like so many people, you know, why is that disconnection? It's such a huge theme still for so many people.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is the feeling that people have that the information that they've been given is not fully true. It's really dissatisfying. And in fact,
Right.
it bothers us. Like you can literally feel it like an irritation inside of yourself and inside of your body. And this is a good, there's a lot of good signaling for this, because as we develop the sense and sensitivity of what it feels like to hear and say the truth, and what it feels like to hear and say a lie, and be able to kinesthetically tell the difference, we become a lot better navigators out there of what's really going on, right? And it's as simple as, you can do this with a friend. It could be like a game, right? So tell me something true, tell me a lie, or have them tell you something and you have to guess whether it's true or whether it's a lie. And really feel, and also notice, especially when it's your turn and you have to say something not true, and really try to convince them that, what that feels like. And if you say something true, what that feels like, because there is a vibration to it. The thing about false statements and things that are not true, especially if they're about something that has happened in the past, it's you're creating a fake branch, almost like an alternate timeline. It's not a real timeline, though. It's just a mental projection of a timeline, an astral ghost, so to speak, of a timeline. And when you tell something that's not true, and I had this experience when I was a young teenager, because like after all of this stuff, I very much experimented with, like, people didn't know me. I was in a new place across the country. Who knows what's true and what's not? So like, sure, I'd stretch the truth, or I'd lie about a story or whatever, just to make people like me more or whatever, right? Because, kids do that, and I had to learn from that one for sure. But what I realized was that whenever you tell a story that's not true, or you stretch the truth a little bit, you have to carry the weight of that. And other people are going to ask you about it, and you got to back it up. And other people ask you about it, and you got to back it up. And the further you go down that line, the more you're holding the weight of this false story. And eventually it's got to collapse in, because the tension and the pain that it creates to hold this false story builds and builds and builds and builds until finally it snaps back. And the snapback can be really intense and very painful, but also it can be very beautiful and very liberating. Anybody who's told a lie for a long time and then finally told the full truth, or kept the truth from someone for a long time and then told them the full truth, it hurts, but wow, it's also very liberating. And it's very transformative. It can be very healing. It can also, you can damage trust for long periods and things like that too. That's of course the nature of it. But the reality is that we're in a world where there's many stories that we've been told that are not true. Even the story of our history, the very history that we believe is the story of human history that goes down the line, is not true. Now, I'm not here to tell you that, like, the earth is 6,000 years old or whatever, like kind of thing like that. No, it's actually the opposite. The truth is that the history that we know of is based on a story of civilization's evolution only going back the past 6,000 to 7,000 years. And we have definitive evidence all over the world, that there are structures that were built with more advanced stone technology than we have today that are at least 13,000 years old. Some cases, they may be 50,000 years old or 100,000 years old. And these stone structures are built with such precision and such high level of technology that the only way we can even see that they must have built them is actually by using advanced plasma cutting technologies. Some of the structures would have required, a diamond saw that's 2 stories tall spinning, like we don't even have diamond saws, that we use.
Right.
we do some, but it's really rare, and it's only for like really, really crazy, you know, kind of building construction. And generally, we won't use the hardest stones when we're doing that kind of construction because it's just too difficult. But for some of these ancient civilizations, as we find in Egypt and Peru, and underlying a lot of the structures in the pyramids in Mexico, although there's so much moisture, things have worn down and worn down and worn down and been rebuilt like 7 or 8 times. So you don't see a lot of the same megalithic stuff on the surface there, but it's there in the geometry of the structures, which means that the mathematics was the same, which means that the underlying structures that used to be there are the same, because there's all these mathematical connections and synergies between what we see in Mexico and what we see in Peru and what we see in Egypt and what we see in Indonesia and what we see off the coast of Japan and the pyramid structures under the water. And the story goes on and on and on. And all of these civilizations all over the planet, which must have somehow been connected in their high level of mathematics and science, also had super advanced technologies in terms of how they were able to work with these stones. Because for them, it was easy. And we know it was easy because they were so prolific with it. It's not like, you know, they just would just do things that would seemingly be to us like a massive waste of time and extremely difficult, but they just did it because, you know, they could, because it was very easy for them to do it. And so the biggest story of all, like who we are as humans and what we've been doing on this planet, that story has been a lie. The story we've learned in our history classes. And then when we get into a lot of the details of things going on right now and every moment, there's all kinds of things that if we really feel into it, you know, you can feel the underlying deeper currents of truth when they're there. But oftentimes, in almost every one of the lenses that we have right now, you know, most of them are highly politically oriented, you know, or highly agenda oriented. And you can see very clearly how these underlying currents of truth are being leveraged to try to drive people psychologically towards a certain belief, towards a certain political perspective, towards a certain, you know, thing or another. And it works in a lot of cases, because when you tell people a whole bunch of truth and then you turn it into what I call a shit sandwich, you know, where you have like,
Right.
you know, this layer on the inside that's designed to be psychologically manipulative. A lot of people eat it because it looks like it, you know, it looks like truth, but there's these layers inside you have to really be cautious about. And that's, you know, that's an important message I have for people right now, is just take everything with lots of salt. You know what I'm saying? Because there's an extremely strong polarity going on, and salt is grounding, right? So you got to ground yourself, come to the present with the ground and the earth beneath your feet, and just notice, is what the story that you're being told, does it make you feel like powerless or powerful? Does it make you feel like everything's just suddenly going to be taken care of? Or does it make you feel like you are the being that's going to make change in the world? Does it make you feel hate and anger towards some mysterious person or forces or beings out there? Or does it help you see that everybody is going through a pattern and going through their own traumas and trying to work it out, and that we're all trying to work out this big game, right? Like, does it create judgment or does it create acceptance, right? And still, even in all of those things, we still need huge amounts of discernment, because how does it work if we just accept that on one end, you know, like, I'll give a very interesting kind of symbolic example, right? So imagine that you're at work with somebody, right? And this is a person in your office or somebody that you know, and maybe they're a leader or a manager, right, so to speak. And on a daily basis, you see this manager yell at people, be rude to people, be very, very dishonoring of women in the office, for example, or act and behave and even speak in ways that seem racist, right? And and then this manager throws a party and serves everybody cupcakes and good food, you know, and then like and then has people claiming that like all of these great things that have happened in the company are thanks to this guy, right? So great, okay, maybe the guy's giving cupcakes out, you know, maybe he's made some good moves for the company, but internally the old structure of the company is actually dying and falling apart because of all of these internal judgments and hate and these stories and these actual actions every day that are in deep contrast to the vision, the mission, and the actual coherence that everybody's seeking. And if we can't make the discernment and notice that and say, oh, actually, this is not real. There's a false narrative that everything's okay because we're in this party, and there's a false narrative that like that this person's doing all this good because these other people that are working with them are saying he's doing all of this good, right? While meanwhile, on a daily basis, what we're seeing is acts of hate, acts of hurt, acts of, you know, like dishonor, you know, taking away rights, taking away people's will, and you know, that's something that we really have to honestly look at. We have to honestly approach that situation and from ourselves be discerning enough to say, okay, well, you know, actually maybe this is not the way it appears on the surface, that there's some manipulation going on here. And if we can at least see it, then we can choose not to participate in it. We can choose not to support that behavior. We can choose to stand for what happens in a daily basis, not the big party at the end, you know, not the big corporate success thing, but what happens every day is what's important, because that's what keeps the team together. That's what keeps us connected with each other, right? So anyway, that's an offering to that.
No, this is brilliant. Thank you so much. And you did pack a lot of information in this. Thank you so much for that. But you know, well, it does feel like we've been living in this false reality for a long time, or you know, talking society-wise, or you know, collective-wise. And do you agree that this the false narrative is actually collapsing right now, or how do you see that happening in the near future?
What I see a lot of is the same kind of pattern that happens when we personally, individually, this is the way people can relate to it, right? When you personally, individually have some major trauma coming up and a shadow coming up, right? Like something that's deep in yourself, something that's very painful in yourself from your life experience, or that's been really difficult to admit to yourself, to look at, you know. What happens is our mind starts to try to grasp whatever we can to like stay afloat, you know, like this can help me, all right, distract myself with this, do this, but then this story, you know, then this story, right? Like this is what's actually happening. And so we like, we're trying to insulate ourselves from actually going through the fall, the deep dive that's going to cause us to go into the heart of the place where that original pain actually is, and what that original hurt is actually about. The thing that we got so hurt and we experienced so much pain that we tried to protect it and we tried to cover it up. We tried to hide it. We tried to put it aside because we didn't want to have to feel and go through the totality of the pain of that, and what it means, what it meant to have that traumatic experience, and what it might have meant in terms of us perceiving ourselves, the way that we might have judged ourselves for it, or the way that we might have felt that we were not good in some way because something horrible that our step parents did or whatever, you know, like there's a lot of reasons why we cover up that pain, you know, and it's a natural thing. It's okay. It's part of human life
Yeah.
that we go through stuff sometimes that's so intense, we don't know how to deal with it at the time. And so we have coping mechanisms that we develop in order to deal with it. So, but later in life, we develop the capacities to actually deal with it. And we develop the skills to deal with it. And once we are ready, it's going to come up again because it wants to have itself fully released and fully expressed, right? And this is what I see happening on a collective level very strongly right now, is that there's these deep wounds, and they're wounds of the false story we've been telling about how this country came together, and, you know, how Christopher Columbus was like this great dude, and all of these things about Thanksgiving, you know, and false stories we have about our holidays, like where Halloween came from. Like, oh, actually we're celebrating it as Halloween, and all the Christians are having fun going out and dressing up as ghouls and goblins and witches and whatever. But
Right.
this is actually an extremely sacred tradition of the Wiccan people, who, by the way, were burned at the stake and hung and killed and slaughtered in one of the largest holocausts this planet's ever had by the Christian people during that different time period, and the Inquisition and so on and so forth. And, you know, and then there's like the cover-ups of our longer history, and that actually maybe we're not the most advanced civilization this planet's ever seen, and maybe there were things that were more advanced in the past in other times. And the stories that we have about why we go to war with these different countries, and like where the terrorists came from, and that maybe some of the story about where terrorism came from is partially because the United States was involved in selling weapons to different small groups and trying to control the narrative in certain places, you know, and has been doing that for a long time. So there's all of these little stories where literally deep pain and massive amounts of death and horrible things have happened, right, on the earth, and to our people, and from the choices our ancestors have made. And a lot of those stories have been covered up with the lies, right? And even now there's narratives that are trying to cover up and cope and hide the deeper underlying real issues that are actually being faced, the real challenges that we're actually facing around water rights and around the environment that we're in and the health of this planet, and indigenous rights, and awareness of how we're going to actually create a thriving planet for the future generations, right? And so the news and the media and a lot of the tweets and a lot of the things, you know, the politically oriented, you know, stuff are mental grabs at, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, no, this is what's happening, no, this is what's happening. And it's all resisting, it's all, you can feel it's all pushing against these deeper underlying truths, and everybody can feel it. And so everybody's like digging, and they're like, is that really what's going on? Is that really, well, this person that I've trusted for a while is now saying that that's what's happening, so that must be what's happening. And some parts of this are true, so maybe the rest of it's true. And, you know, we're getting caught in all these little spindling whirlwinds of mental compensation for not facing the actual pain and the deep, deep trauma that we've been through together as a planet, as a nation, as a species. And when we really face that, and we grieve, and we actually feel how things have gone down, and we actually look at what's happened from, you know, to so many kids, because of unfortunately vaccines that were not great. You know, I'm not saying all vaccines are bad, but some vaccines really, really hurt kids for long periods of time, right? And like, I had a time experience, you know, a few weeks ago where one night, you know, with this whole thing and the potential of vaccinations coming back in and forced vaccinations and stuff, I just really tuned in to the pain of all of the families that have had a kid that got vaccinated that then basically have lost that kid into a totally different psychological state of being, major physiological damage and problems. And I just cried for hours about it, because that's real. That's a real thing. Like, you can tell a story that we have to do this or we have to do this because this is what's going to make us safe, or this is not. But the real stuff is what people are actually experiencing. It's the actual challenges that people have. It's the actual addictions that they're fighting. It's the actual, challenge of being at home every day and dealing with the reality of your family and dealing with, how things have gone down on this planet. And when we face that, and when we really embrace it and we really grieve it, I can tell you the amount of joy and lightness and ease and the sense that everything's okay and that you're home, and that, like, the amount of inspiration you get to make a difference, to do something good in the world, to just share truth with people, just get out there, just create that project or that art piece or that song or that book or that whatever it is that you've been envisioning for so long. The swell of the energy that comes behind that, when you really are willing to face the pain, when you really are willing to grieve, when you're really willing to move through those emotions, it's so powerful how much light swells into that space of that wound.
Thank you so much for sharing this. You know what, it takes a huge amount of courage to face trauma, and it takes huge amount of resilience, and actually being able to go in and feel that pain again and feel it actually fully, because when we are traumatized, we actually block it out, so we don't even feel it. But then to heal it, you have to actually go in and fully embrace it. But yet, what I appreciate about your sharing is that, I feel like we need to paint those pictures, like what's on the other side. Because if you just go into the trauma and re-experience it and feel it, it feels horrifying. But if you have that in mind, if you have that picture and that vision to where you're going through, where is the exit point and where are you going, and into that incredible empowerment and full blossoming of the human being, I think that can carry us through as individuals and as collectives. So I feel like sharing those visions and sharing, the beauty of what's on the other side is really, perhaps that's one of the answers.
Yeah. Well, there's a miracle hidden in it, right? And I'm not just talking about mentally processing trauma, because when we just go to it with the mind, it can be very confusing, and we can get caught up in it and try to understand it. And it can be difficult for the mind to fully grasp the nature of it. But when we let ourselves really witness it, really fully feel it, really fully move through the experience of what we need to release and feel and let go of through our bodies. And there's lots of great healing methodologies for this, from theta healing to different forms of kinesthesiology to somatic therapies are really powerful. There's a lot of ways that we can address these things and work with coaches and work with guides and healers to move through these different states. But there's really a miracle on the other side. And the miracle is that once you are really in it and you really are moving through it and you're really feeling it all, usually there's a realization that happens. And that realization is like you've now opened up the channels. And so now all your chakras are processing the information. And then suddenly you actually see the whole spectrum, not just this one part or this one area. And it's not just the thing you were afraid of. And it's not just the thing you're angry about. And it's not just this or that. It's actually the whole thing is seen. And when you suddenly see the whole thing, you also can sometimes glean an insight into why it happened. And that is where the miracle happens, because when you realize why something horrible has happened in your life or has happened on the planet, and you realize there's a reason that it's been kept secret, there's a reason that it's been behind doors, there's a purpose for the way that things have happened. And an example of this may be like, well, for me, it was extremely painful to go through the loss of my stepmom and my stepbrothers going crazy and my dad's, world getting crushed and all of this stuff. But that was the thing that got me to really start questioning everything that I've been told in my life. That was the thing that got me to actually face what was hidden, face the shadow, face the darkness, face the things that I couldn't understand. And that led to my awakening. Like, if that had not happened, I would not have woken up as young as I did. And I wouldn't have realized who I am as early as I did, and be, able to do this work in my life and be where I am now. And, it's fascinating, but that same principle goes all the way down to the most simple things that we think are mistakes or errors, right? So, like, you're in a rush, you're in a hurry, you've got to get to a meeting, you go into the coffee shop and you're at the counter and you're like, oh, come on, make my coffee, and they run your card and it doesn't work, right? And now you're like, no, and you're like, come on, you're trying to get, they're like, there's an ATM over there, so you go to the ATM and you do the thing and you're still hurting, and you're in this, like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Right? Like, I can't believe it, And then, you finish getting your coffee and you go get in your car and you drive down the road, and there was a car accident that just happened, like within minutes before you were there. And if you had gotten your coffee in time and gone out, that car accident might have been yours. That's kind of the, like, heaviest situations where it's like, whoa, okay, something kept me from having this experience, that I didn't need to have, and in other cases, it may be that you thought that you were going to be late or something was going to be massively wrong. And then when you're freaking out about it and it's last minute or whatever, or hopefully you're not freaking out about it, because maybe you learn after a while that this is just how things go, you start to kind of like, okay, it's all right. If things seem like they're going wrong, it's okay, because it's part of the greater picture. Mm-hmm. But then, the person that you were supposed to meet with or whatever, they text you and it turns out they're 20 minutes late anyway. They can't get there because of traffic or because of whatever. So everything can align you to right timing. I like to think of it, I think back to when I was a kid and I watched cartoons a lot, and it's like a moment of, like, Bugs Bunny, where, like, Fudd's trying to get him, or the Roadrunners, even better example. Wile E. Coyote's trying to drop this giant, Acme crate full of dynamite on his head, and it's, Roadrunner's just sitting there like, doot, 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 and then, like, oh, like, he notices something and he goes, and he just, like, zips over here and boom, it lands. So, like, at the exact moment he's out of the way, or Bugs Bunny's out of the way of the piano falling or whatever, because that's what it means to just be in trust and to be in the current. When we're in home, when we're in the center of the vortex, and we're actually just attending to what's true and what's right and where we are right now and what's our next moment, what's our next step, what's the next word that's coming, then we're in this current and we can ride that current, and it will guide us to the most amazing, powerful, and beautiful experiences we can imagine. And it will also carry us through the times of our deepest pain and our deepest shadow. And it will help us resolve our most painful traumas. But we just need to be present and let those things come up and work on building a physiological toolkit to addressing it and moving it and helping our bodies actually move through the phases of whatever is being signaled on the inside.
Wow. I'm just processing everything that you're sharing with us, because it's a beautiful vision, and I just love how coherent it is. You can feel the truth in your words. You're giving that example, and it's also, I think that's the case. Like we just need to focus on what is the truth, and how do I achieve that mastery of actually being home, of staying present no matter what. And we can all do it. I mean, I think this is just in our human essence. It's not something out there that spiritual masters only can get. So
Mm-hmm.
so that is really beautiful. And I know we're sort of over time a little bit, but is there something that I know that you shared so much already, like what do you feel like you would like people to take from it the most? It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, here's my little gift. I'm gonna go home with that and just unpack it and be excited.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my dear friends, from a period of my life when I was doing a lot of the work at the White House and the UN and doing a lot of youth ambassadorship work. She wrote this little book, and the book was all about the in-betweens. And she calls them the in-betweens. And it was about the moments in between the big events in our lives. And we have these big events. We graduate, we get a job, we do the thing, we launch a project, we get funding, we manifest, the dream project we've had, we buy a house, we do these things. These are big events, right? But the life is full, actually, of all the moments that are the space between those events, that are the in-betweens. And the in-betweens are like these little gifts that are spread all throughout our lives, and that we don't really even think about how wonderful and how glorious they are and how special they are. And because we don't really acknowledge them that much, we also don't always notice when they're happening. And the in-between might be that moment where you sleep in a little bit and you just have this amazing cuddling time with somebody that you love, and time seems to stretch out, and the sun's shining in through the window, and there's a feeling of light and sparkle and just total peace, where there's nothing to do, there's nothing to accomplish, there's nothing to react to, there's just this beautiful heavenly spaciousness. And what most people don't realize is that that kind of beautiful moment can exist anytime throughout the day. Like if you just slow down a little bit while you're making your lunch, and you just like tune in to like, okay, like this, I'm going to eat some of this. And man, I just really love, gluten-free bagels, and I love putting the cream cheese on it, and I love having tomato on top, and an egg, and like just really stopping for a second, like your meeting coming up in 30 minutes, and like I've got the next thing, or I've got this call I need to get on, and I need to order the trash bags, and I need, like just stop, just slow down, just be here right now, and just think about how freaking awesome it is that you get to make a bagel and cream cheese at home today. Like, how precious is it that you have water that you can drink at your house, like available? You don't even have to pull it up from a well. Like, it's just coming literally like magic out of a filter or out of a tap or whatever, Be careful with your tap water, by the way. Make sure you check it and test it, make sure you know what's in it. It's good to filter water because there's a lot of chemicals in a lot of the waters. But even just appreciating the moment, and yeah, your phone is going off all the time, right? And people are texting you and stuff, but instead of just like scanning new information, new picture on Instagram, new thing, what if when you look at a message, you just stop and you really just for a moment, just like feel how you feel about the person that texted you and your connection with them, and reflect on how beautiful that connection is, or how little you know them and how much more you might want to know about them. it seems so simple, right? Like what I'm saying is the just ultimate, like, well, duh, right? But
Mhm.
it's so simple, but it's also that which is what creates depth in our lives. It's what allows us to find peace. It's what allows us to find richness in a moment. It's about how we actually bring the force of how big we are and how massive our mind is and how much we can hold and accomplish and do and feel and all of that. And it's bringing it all in to right here and just being here and really appreciating right now and this moment you're listening to this interview, this moment that I get to be on this show with you, Monica, this moment that I get to remember and to feel this way about my life because I'm sharing it with you and because I'm sharing it with people that are listening. Sometimes we have the deepest reminders within ourselves for what we need. And it just takes slowing down enough and tuning in enough to really hear that music playing and that symphony shining.
Wow, this is gorgeous. In between moments. Such a beautiful reminder. Every moment I feel, and it's also the, like the practice of gratitude for every single moment and every single thing that we may overlook as a gift, as magic. We're full of magic already, right here and
Yes,
right
we
now.
are.
Yes,
Yes, we are.
magical beings. Wow, so amazing. I feel like you just delivered so much, so many different messages and so much to unfold and unpack. And then I always feel like anybody who's listening, it's like everybody takes what they need, what their soul resonates with, and actually will
Mhm.
then take on their journey, and it will help them to heal and help them to face things and help them to evolve and become more magical yet. Wow.
Yes, indeed.
Wow. So, and Adam, is there how can people connect with you to if they want to learn more about you and your work and your teachings?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a kind of catch-all portal for a lot of different areas of my work and my projects is just adamapollo.com. If you Google my
Mhm.
name, it'll come right up. Um, I have a whole video library there, an audio library of tons of different talks and interviews and presentations I've done over the years, and as well as a few of my different shows that are on Gaia TV now, just recently released with
Oh.
George Norrie, and then also with Ruben Langdon and interviews with Ed. Um, and I also have the online academies, which are a good place to find me. So the Guardian Alliance, which you can find to just go search for Guardian Alliance or just guardian.is, is a good way to get into that. And that site is really a compilation of a lot of my work and also other really amazing young teachers and masters who help to share insights into how to master ourselves and master the different archetypes of our being. And then in the Resonance Academy, it's a little bit more of my academic world side of things, where I wrote um, basically all of module 3 and most of module 4, which are the modern physics and unified physics portions of what we call the unified science program. And the unified science program is a super beautiful deep dive into the nature of reality and shifts in our worldview and how some of the greatest thinkers in history, were often not received at the time of their work, but then, over time, their ideas became fundamental to everything. So, we're in a time that can happen a little bit faster now. And as we get that perspective, we can also see how ancient cultures are related to the physics that we understand about reality now, and how the future and a lot of my work in the space of humanity's galactic future, which is clear to me that we're very much on our way to becoming an interstellar species. And what that means is we're going to be facing a lot of big changes, including a lot of much more diversity that we're encountering than we even have here on Earth. And it also means that there's certain kinds of uh, consciousness developments and growth areas that we need to look at right now in order to really achieve that transition. And so all of that's very anchored in the physics work and in my science work and mathematics work and that kind of thing. So, but those are some good places to find me. And there's many more as well if you follow the rabbit holes. But yeah, I look forward to connecting with any of you if anybody wants to reach out or share. And you can generally find me on social media under just Adam Apollo or Adam_Apollo. Yeah, it's pretty easy to locate me. But thank you so much for having me, Monica.
Thank
It's
you.
such a pleasure.
Well, such a pleasure to me, and definitely I'm going to post all the links in the YouTube description. So anybody who wants to connect with Adam, please go ahead and just use some of his. I mean, take advantage of all that's available because it is amazing. So, well, thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure actually, and such an amazing experience to listen to you and just share messages that are so relevant for everybody, I feel. So thank you again, and all the blessings to you. And I know that your future is going to be unfolding beautifully, and it's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
And yes, so hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Thank you, and best of luck with this beautiful show. And I look forward to seeing more of your shows in the future. So
thank you very much. Okay, take care.
Aloha.
All right, aloha to you.